So what we're going to do, since we have the ability to really like interact with each other, we don't have a huge stage between us and we don't have too many people around here, is I want to start with a pretty quick exercise, because later on we'll discuss like front-end issues and what you could do and how you could profit from UX as a developer, and what kind of practices are there that you could implement right away. And I tried to make it interactive, but obviously we cannot fire up our laptops and I cannot teach you to sketch and it wouldn't make any sense. Okay, so let's get into it. So I want you to write things in the Post-its, and we'll collect it here. We'll give it a time frame. And this is what I'm thinking about. You can extend it, however, this is just to give you a kind of hint of what I'm thinking about, that like what kind of design problems you ran into recently, either from the front-end development side or from the design side, and what you would improve in your workflow. Obviously, that sort of relates to this kind of topic, or any sort of usability issue, or in your team if there's some sort of workflow. Come in. No, thank you. Yes, and like what are the frustrating parts of your workflow? Again, like discussions with design. Do you have the Post-its and the pen and paper? I would appreciate it. Yes. Okay, then let's give it a time frame. Let's say like 5 minutes. And when you're done, then please come here and just put it on this wall. It's also great because it's an exercise, so you don't get to just sit all the time. Oh, I cannot even. What do you don't have Post-its? Hello. We're writing our final exams. Come in. Okay. We are collecting problems and issues with front-end development and design, and they're writing in Post-its. That's what you see. Okay, if you're done, then please come over here and just put the Post-its on this beautiful white sheet of paper. Yes, our first contender. Thank you, you're cool. Okay. Great Post-its. Okay. Again, very good, thank you. Nice.
These are design problems in the backend, not UX.
Okay, right. Okay. Anyone with Post-its? Too much options, right? It's like too much white space. Aha. Okay. Okay. Okay, so anyone? It's all good so far. Okay. Right, so what we're going to do is obviously we'll discuss some other stuff and then we'll return to this board and hopefully part of it will be eliminated or we'll get to that in any case. So first things first, like I said, sorry for non-Pulp Fiction viewers. So about UX and why would you care and why I was talking about cross-functional teams. And obviously, I think for most of you, it's very clear, so I just breeze through these slides, that obviously UX is not UI and not just visual design, and it's definitely not something that's closely related to art as well. So how I would define UX is, like the every experience that you have as a user while interacting with a product. And it's important because that includes a lot more stuff than visual design. And for example, these are like what are closely included or involved in UX. So as you could see, obviously design, the structure of it. But there's marketing as well, because how you build up, like the communication part of it, how you can address users, that's also something that the user experiences while using the product. Obviously product management and what kind of product decisions you make, and product management / clients, because obviously as a client, if you are making a product, then obviously the decisions that you make on the business end and what features to include, for instance, it's something that the user definitely would affect the user. And there's my favorite, obviously development, and development is also UX, obviously the front end part of it, because if you think about experiences, now tell me you never freaked out because something didn't work, or there was a bug, or there was some sort of like issue with the interface, and that's also UX. And this is how I think about UX, that it's like not one person's responsibility, and we shouldn't be like, oh, that's the UX guy, and okay, that's the design guy, but to really empower and embrace that we look at the product as a whole. And if you were to look at the product and the business as a whole, and you could add more fields to it, like the sales communication that you do, the social media that people ran into, or the customer service that you have, and extended with this, like customer experience comes to life. And this is again something that it's important to keep in mind while we are talking about UX, because if you just narrow it down to structure and creating wireframes, then it doesn't make really a sense. So the principles when we are like designing screens And these are not so fancy ones. These are like no-brainers. But obviously, the users never have time. And they want everything right now, and they don't take the time to learn something. And this means that they don't have patience. So even I myself, when I use something, I'm not patient. So I don't give like a second chance and a second go at something that I don't figure out at first. Because it's in the human nature not to do that. And why it's important as a principle, because when you are creating a product, you can easily get this feeling that obviously you work a lot on that, and then you have to change it, and then you have to reconsider your whatever, and that means like plus work for you. But, and in that case, whether if you're a designer, whether if you're a developer, I completely understand. I feel the same way, because it's hard to say that we have to throw it away because it's not so easy. But, and it's not the best or the most straightforward solution. But there's no other way, because users are very impatient, and they expect something, you know, like, or everything straight away. And something that's very, very important is that we need to focus on first-time user experience. Obviously, there are returning users. That's a completely other deal. But when we're talking about usability, then you have to consider like so how it's usable when you're first seeing that interface. And it's again, when you are developing something and how it should work, or when you're designing how it should work, it should be something that you get instantly, and you have to put yourself into the user's shoes that, you know, like they see it as a first time. And these can be frustrating. I mean, these principles, if you think about it. But how I look at things is, the more you look at things from the user's perspective, the less stress you will have. Because it's kind of a good feeling to justify all these questions in an easy way, and not to get frustrated that, the designer fucked it up, or the developer messed it up, instead of, or this was the recommendation, and the client came in and destroyed the whole thing, or the product manager. But if you introduce this kind of view, so there's business and there are the user needs, and that's kind of along those lines you are building something, then it removes a lot of stress. Less choice is better. Like in Hicks' law, it's very important that the more choices you add, exponentially the time increases that you need to make a decision. And it's true, for example, for signups, or when you want to sell something. So on an interface, the more choices there are, the more time it takes to make a decision on which direction to go. And it's important because a lot of people would argue that, yeah, let's give this choice to the user and this choice, and sign up with Google, Twitter, Facebook, and whatnot, because choices are better. But at the end, and I'm going to show you a sign-up form for this, that in reality, it really makes it more difficult, and you could go into more problems. And then, obviously, you don't expect users to think about how it works or what it is, because no time, no patience. Now, I love visual design, but I had to create this slide, that usability is far more important than UI design. And this is one reaction that I have when a front-end developer goes to me that, yeah, I know it looks crap, and it's like, don't do that. It's not, if it works, and you should focus on, you know, like usability, and if you have to add something to the product, the number one thing is that it works. Because if it works and you add something that, you know, like it could look better, it doesn't make a huge impact on the business. Maybe, you know, like it can be better, but that's like from the design perspective, there are things that really affects the business, but usability is the thing that affects the business. So, yes, I just wanted to breeze through quickly about what kind of interactions or what kind of processes we have, because when I teach designers, I always teach that you don't design screens, but you design a set of screens, you design a process. And that's why I like when they learn or work closely with developers, because then they understand that if I design like, I don't know, a checkout screen, it's not just that screen. There are different states. The input has different states, and there are error messages and validations and all that kind of jazz. What you know better as a developer because you have to think through it anyways. But it's good to have like a high-level overview. So a user journey, I will show an example for this, is something that could show the whole process of the product, or like a big feature, how it works, and what kind of experience we want to give to the users. This is something that usually a UX designer would create it, but for example, I love to include developers in this as well. And there's the separate use cases that how you could use a feature. And this is a very, very detailed breakdown. I'll have a screen for that too. And obviously there are the separate interactions on a screen. If you think about a checkout screen, how that, what kind of interactions it has, and how the screens are tied together. And there are micro interactions. Who knows what micro interactions are? Hands up, please. Great, it's going to be news. Right, what kind of content you are interested in at first. And these are the steps in the vertical axis, like landing on the website from social media or referral, signs up, goes through the onboarding, and lands on the dashboard. And obviously, we can add a lot of detail, what's important for us in the steps. For example, what's happening, what does the user think and feel. This part, it's best filled based on research, by the way. So if you do interviews or you do user tests, this should be something that you don't guess, but instead that you test out. And hopefully UX designers do this and researchers. And this is also very important, like what kind of goals and experiences that you want to deliver. It's obviously different because for a checkout page, for the whole user journey or checkout process, I would say that obviously complete the checkout, whatever. But experience is something different because the experience for a checkout is that you feel that you trust this service, that it's very easy, that it's breaking down into smaller steps so it's not too overwhelming to go through, and stuff like that. And to identify what are like the key challenges in a certain step. And obviously this could be interesting from the product perspective, from the design perspective, from the developer perspective, across it all. You can feel free to stop me anytime, by the way. And this is a use case, so a bit lower level. And this is a breakdown of a feature which we identified a certain persona, and we have a story. It's really like a user story, but very, very breaking down into smaller steps. With even you can add conditions, because as you can see, this is a feature that you can set on the back end, and we have a different process, a different flow when that setting is like set on or off. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen designer doing spreadsheets like that. Have you? No, not really. But it's, yeah, obviously in another workshop, I would tell designers to do spreadsheets like this and hand it over to developers, because obviously it helps a lot to understand how a use case works. But the most important part of these use cases is that it helps you to think through the process, because it's very didactic. That, yes, I open the core booking feature from a link, I can see the available course, I can select date and time, blah, 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 blah. And then this is the important part, and this is why originally I started to create this use case, because I wanted to think through that, how the changes in the back end affect the front end, because it's a very complex application. Okay, so yes, before micro interactions, there's this thing called context. And by context, I mean where, when, how the product would be used, or is it used, or how they going to discover it. And I have a bad example for this, because for this previous tool, there's a mobile app, and this is for coaches, for tennis coaches, to be used on the tennis courts. And it's very easy to take the logical approach when you are designing or developing something, and not think through that in the real context what people need at that certain point. So here's the deal. Yeah, I just wanted to see that, for example, a user persona's most important part is the context, so where and how the product would be used. And because if you really understand this, it really affects the platform, for example. A lot of people, when they come to me or come to my company, they think they have an idea of, we need a mobile app or we need a web application and whatever platform. And then when we go into and see that what's the actual context and how people would, on what platform they would use it, then it turns out then it's like 2 out of 3 cases, it's like a different platform that they thought originally. And this is what we are into recently, that there's, we need to do a web application. Now, then it turned out that they would never use it in a web platform. They would only use it on mobile. So, yes. Now, I'll give you a hint what it is. Hello? The air conditioning is fine. Anyway, so this screen is when you are a coach, you're on the tennis court, and someone who is not signed up, not a member, just comes to you that, hey, I want to play. It's usually kids. And this is a feature that enables you to add a member, well, quickly. So when you come to me, I just da-da-da-da-da, and maybe later I do the administration and all that, and it works. Now, the problem here is that every single input is required on this screen. Now, and it's a lot because it's emergency contact and I don't know what not. So the problem here is obviously on the logical end, it's exactly the same process that they use to add a new customer. But when you add a new customer on the administrative part, you have a lot of time because you're sitting in an office and you can type in from, like from a paper. But when you're on the court and your mobile phone is on your hands and there comes a, yeah, I want to play, then you don't get to have that kind of flexibility in time. So this is why what I'm referring to, that the context is the most important part of the work. And this is something that designers and developers have to consider. Because in this case, you could destroy this whole feature by adding the required stuff to the fields.
Also, this is a GDPR nightmare.
Yeah, pretty much. to be up to date, yeah. And micro interactions. So micro interactions are like the little things that are like recurring. So for example, it's not going to be good, but so this is a micro interaction that I switch on and off the mute button on iOS. Or this is a micro interaction. I think it's some obsolete thing, by the way. I never saw this interaction on Facebook. Maybe. Or when you type in a new password and it helps you with validating how strong it is. And obviously, this is like the lowest level of the whole interaction and process thing. It's in the bottom. And the way it's interesting, because it's really between design and front-end development. Because usually, obviously, in the design, it's not applicable because it doesn't work, it doesn't animate and stuff. And these are the things that add a lot of detail to the product and can really boost usability if they are refined. But this is kind of overlooked because when a designer hands off some, like static designs, and the front-end developer is like, okay, I don't think about it, I just make it how it is, then you don't really have micro interactions, or you don't have this level of sophistication here. Okay, so let's embrace this developers and UX thing a bit with the Wolf, Mr. Wolf. One thing that, because I was wondering a lot that how to address this issue, that I know it looks bad, but I don't know what to do with it. And since I embrace that designers should learn a bit of coding, actually, the more they understand the front-end development, the more chance they have to think about stuff that's not implemented in the designs, but rather in development. And the same goes for developers as well, because the more practice you have in design, then the faster you will be in, for example, site building. Because developers and designers who do site building and they have the ability to, like, eyeball a design. And to be honest, I'm not a fascist on pixel perfect design, because it's all about looking great. And obviously, a developer could create a more consistent layout than in design, because it's a different tool. Because you use the classes, you set the CSS, and it's across all the design. While in a design environment, you have to push pixels all the time. So what I would, for example, embrace is to have some design skills and some practice, because it just makes your work a lot better, and for you it feels a lot better. And for example, my friend said that when I'm handing over a design, and he was like, I don't want to hear clients and you going like, yeah, it's almost good, but change this and that, and change the color here, and the pixels are not quite right here. He said that I want to hear this reaction that, oh my God, it's amazing. It's better than the designs. It's just like, just do whatever you want. And he did it. And I think the way he did it is that he had ownership of the design and the product. So he was like, okay, if it's not consistent, if it's not thought through, then I'll make it so. And obviously this helps a lot when there are like missing screens and parts. And the ownership thing, it's very important, because if you know how to manage a product design or interface, then you can use designers. And so if it would be another workshop for designers in the next room, I would tell the same, like vice versa, because so for designers, it's great to understand the development process, because you are prepared for what they need, and you could help them to to produce better products at the end. But for developers, understanding that what you need and what you could possibly miss on the design end is great, because you can instruct designers. So don't be reactive, be proactive. And if you were to improve your design skills, then these are a few good resources. I don't know if anybody knows Good UI. It's a huge library of UI patterns and good and bad practices that's tested out with A/B testing. So I can actually show it to you, because we have the time for that. And no, I don't have internet connection, so just imagine. Anyway, so it's like bad practice, good practice for layout, and UX practices and UI practices. It's pretty fun. This is again a very, very feasible book by Joel Marsh. It's like one page, one design principle, or one layout, or one UI, like a lesson. And I don't know, it's like 100 plus whatever lessons. And I always recommend that when you have your morning coffee, you just look at in 2 minutes in one lesson, and okay, it's good. It's like a lexicon. And okay, how many of you ever were stuck with colors? What kind of colors to use? And there's a button. Just stands up. Just one. Okay. So there's a very cool tool called Coolors or Colors or whatever. If you enter a main color, then it helps you to match up with colors that works perfectly for the designs. So it's actually very cool. Very I think a lot of designers use it because you can lock in colors, so you have a full palette. And it helps you to find the matching colors. You don't have to use any default anymore. And obviously there's the 100-day UI challenge, which is a designer thing, but recently some front-end developers started to do that as well. And the challenge is, throughout 100 days, you need to create a specific design, like a screen for the mobile app or a payment screen or whatever. Dribbble is full of these kind of things, which are most of the time not very helpful from the UX end, but it's a very good exercise for the UI. If you want to get started, dailyui.co, but you could find it in the landing page in the resources section. Okay, so style guides. I am curious, how many of you used a style guide? It can be like a developed style guide or get a style guide from a designer. Anyone? No, nobody. Okay, so I know that designers are not so good at this, so like in every designer's name, apology. And so this is about collecting all the necessary elements and the different states of the visual elements that you need in the designs, need in the interfaces. And the most important part of it is that obviously it's created like by the designers, but it gives us a common space to discuss the different states of the elements that would be a pain in the ass to put in the design, because there's a button and there's a hover state, there's an active state and focus and whatnot and loading state. And obviously if you put it in the design, that's pretty overwhelming. And as a developer, then you have to find that, okay, this should be a hover state, I guess, or whatnot. And this is why like style guides are for. And obviously, if you're not, and there's the template in the landing page that you can download, and I'll show it to you in a second. But this is if you don't get this as a developer, you could always send this template to the designer that, hey, just do that. And it's kind of will help them what different states and what you need in front-end development, so you don't have to like ask that, there's a missing state, and what happens now called inspect and was called inside before, just don't lose that track. So when the designs are uploaded, you get a very easy interface to measure stuff, the distances, and copy-paste CSF if you want. So it's trying to replace like Sketch and Photoshop. So as a developer, you shouldn't like buy the license, and you don't have to dig into the designs. So what's included in the style guide? Obviously colors, yeah. But the most important part, like buttons, forms. So we have a lot of states for buttons, like overactive, disabled, whatnot. I like to include all the icons as well, so you could export all the assets from there. And for the input fields, now this is where it's getting hot, because these are the stuff that if you want to put into a design, it's like complete overkill. Because if you have one input, then you have these kind of states. But if you have one input on a screen, then how are you going to justify it? With all the validation stuff and error messaging, which we're going to touch upon later. And also typography and breakpoints if you want to, or if you use a grid, all the header, footer elements, and the different interactions in the header and footer, so like the static elements, pop-ups, tooltips, error handling, system notifications, and like other frequent elements. So it should be like a complete package for you guys to start working. And this is a sign for me, so I need to show you a sketch file, which is this. So if I zoom out, this would be a complete style guide. And if I zoom in, as you could see that we have buttons, we have primary buttons, secondary buttons, and it's detailed down that when and how they should be used. Or there are like the different states that when, for example, normal, for a share button, obviously there's a state when we want to give feedback to the users that it's shared, and it's like a success state of that specific button. Or when we go into forms, yeah, this is my favorite. So I'll just zoom in. So we have a standard state, a hover state, a focus with a drop down, obviously. Then what happens if you hover over the drop down or the input is selected, and the top we have like focus modes, how will it look like, what's the difference between the placeholder and the written out text, how it looks if there's a hint, also very important, how the input behaves when it's under like some sort of validation. Now this is, again, a lot of times it's just missing. Or how do you show when it's a success? And you kind of need all this, and obviously you don't want to put that in the design. And if you don't have as a developer, then, and obviously you don't, if you don't want to sit down and just go through the designs, just use this as a template, give it to the designer, and hey, just fill this in. Because most of the designers, I'll tell you from experience, I train a lot, they design this. Maybe the hover state. No clue about all the rest of the stuff. So, and if there's a great framework, then it removes a lot of pressure. We have search bars and autocomplete, which is one of my favorites, because if you design a search bar, if you just design a standard state, it's like one out of many. Because as you could see, the autocomplete, it's something very interesting. When I type in, when it highlights, like the matching part of the hit, and you really use this space. And obviously, it's a UX question, because if you don't design this interface, if you don't think about it, then you don't realize that there's space for here to show the recent searches. And this is partly design. This is partly UX, but partly business issue as well, because you just completely miss this opportunity to make the product more convenient. So yeah. And for example, here's a date picker when you select travel dates. So how it looks normal, hover, the date picking, for some reason the shadow is not appearing, and after the date picked. And inside, again, the different states of this. Icons illustrations is something that's like good to have, the typography, and just a sec. Again, since maybe you do it as a component or something, but okay. Come back. Good. Okay, so for example, for a header, you always have lots of different states, like hover states, and the hover states wouldn't be the same in every element, and you have like drop downs, in this case for notifications, and personal menus, or how it looks when you are not logged in. And these are the things that you pick up along the years working with developers, because they are the ones that first point out that, okay, they're a designer, but how it looks when you're not logged in. It's like, I don't know, we'll do something. So yes, and the other frequent elements that could be, yeah, this is a grid anyway. I'll just don't switch it off now. So the most frequent pop-up, so this is like a basic messaging pop-up, how I call it, when it's like a one way of one direction communication. Or there's the default yes, no pop-up with some sort of error messaging. Or there's, in this case, it was a lot of different things regarding the profiles, so it made a lot of sense to include that as well. And so you get like a pretty good Lego set to build up the actual interface. And to make it even more feasible, so you don't have to open up Sketch, which could be very painful when you're on Windows, because you cannot. Then what you could do is actually export it into HTML, so you could access it offline. This is called Sketch Measure. So any designers using Sketch, there's a free plugin that you could download and export the whole designs. So it creates an HTML preview, and I could zoom in and out. And if you hover over an element, you could do your measure thing. And I have all the properties and copy paste out the text as well. This is something similar that InVision did with the inspecting that I mentioned before, but why developers most of the time prefer this? Because, for example, for this style guide, I cannot click on, for example, text and help, like instructional text only on the elements because all the rest is locked. So by accident, you cannot just highlight an element that you don't need. And so for example, this is a nice way to hand over a style guide. You don't need Sketch, you just fire this up, you build up the most important components for your design, for the interface, and you are good to go. Any questions regarding the style guide? Nothing. Okay, go on.
Do you also include style guides for a mobile phone where you're entering the website on a mobile phone because it gets killed?
Mm-hmm.
Like for the autocomplete textbook that you have?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like it was a desktop style guide, but if there's a mobile version or it's a mobile app, or there's like a responsive version which obviously affects the header, for example, then you need to create the different states for that too. And I mean, since designers can create these kind of things, they just don't have a checklist to go through. Because it's a very good point that you made, because most of the time the designer creates like the desktop version and the developer freaks out that, okay, but what's going to happen in the mobile view? And this is why it's great to go through all these kind of elements. And if you design for mobile, or if it should be displayed on mobile as well, then you need that definitely. And I saw this from my developer friend who is also into style guides. And what he does, it doesn't load. Okay, but there's that thing, the storybook, that you could use to create. Boldy, help me out. He's my colleague. So is this React? Yeah. Okay. I don't want to say anything stupid. So there's a React storybook that you could build up components like in the style guide, but it's like backed up with real code. And it's accessible for everybody in the team. So it's not just the designs, but all the buttons and how they work, and you could really preview them. And it's a React storybook, so you definitely need to check it out. Sorry, I don't have the image for this, for some reason. Okay, my favorite part, error handling. Because it does matter how you handle errors, because, for example, if you're on a checkout or if you buy something and you ran into an error, or you like mess up something, then the position, the placement, and the actual text and all that. So how do you recover from an error? It's a huge question, and it has a huge impact on conversions, for example. Because if I don't know how to recover from an issue, which happens from time to time, then I won't be able to do so, so you could lose me on the business end as a user. So, for example, sometimes I work with companies and just focusing on success and error messaging and just improving that part, and it has a huge impact. Sometimes it's like 100% in conversion plus, because obviously if you, get lost in the street and you don't get to ask anybody, and you don't get information on how to get to the right path, then you are truly lost. So, and obviously this is something that designers tend to forget about it. These are the factors, types, and ingredients. Obviously we have copy and we have design. For the factors, the timing, so when you see the error messaging, that's important. And the most important part of it is the placement. The type, inline, tooltip, full screen, system messaging, it's also in the cooking plan. Now, this is a bad example for placement. And this is very frequent. And this is when obviously the designer didn't design the different error displays. So what did the developer do? And this is, by the way, looks great. So on the UI end, you could see it's red and it's a nice close whatever with animation, but it doesn't help the fact that I made the mistake here because whatever, and I don't see the validation here. So what brings us to inline validation, which is huge, that, for example, it's a good example with Google, that I always see the error message where I made the mistake. And for example, this is a micro interaction at the same time. So my rule of thumbs for error messaging is that the first, that you need to be clear, and the user has to understand that there's a mistake and there's some error messaging somewhere. And I have a fun example for that too, because sometimes the user don't even recognize that there's an issue. And secondly, again, whenever you can use that, use inline error validation because it helps a lot. And I hate pre-validation or premature validation or however you would call it. And for example, I think the next slide should be, yes, this. Again, if I skip an input, it automatically freaks out that you left this out. So instead of letting me make the mistake, it validates early on. Now, this is just very frustrating because it's completely unnecessary. And I could have put another image here. This is, not being able to skip an input without freaking out. But the other bad practice that I see often is, for example, when you type in your email and it's all red and says that it's not the right format, whatever, until I type in the right format. And it's, again, why frustrate somebody if you can, so it's like, you should be more positive, I guess, and say that they're going to be typing in the good thing. Or if not, then we'll validate it. But it's just unnecessary frustration on the user end that I type in and it's already red. And I haven't even put in the right format for it. And copy. I know it's going to be a fun topic to discuss, because most of the designers and developers' reaction to copy is something like this, that who writes the copy, and I don't write the copy in the first place. Michael Scott, thank you. But the copy is very important when it comes to messaging, and what I'm referring to is not like for example, on a landing page, the sales copy, but the so-called microcopy part of it, which are like the instructional text, and the button labels and the hints that helps you to stay on track and to perform certain interactions. And this is again something that I was referring to earlier, that by only improving this microcopy part of it, it's huge, and it's like the best conversion rate optimization technique like ever. Now, when it comes to like whose responsibility of writing the copy, well, ideally, you would have the UX designer do it for you. But this is like a new hot topic, like UX writing and whose responsibility is this. But I think it's good if the UX designer writes the copy, but if not, then somebody has to do it. And that's why I will do a little exercise on copywriting. I know you're going to love it. You write a lot of code, and now we can write some little copy. Copy, like, yeah, it's like the text that appears on a button or an instructional. Oh, you know what? It's like, I'll show you an example. Writing these labels is microcopy. Or these are all microcopies. Okay? Always ask a question if I'm saying something that's not clear. Okay, yes. So, now, the problem with this screen, which is very frequent, is that it's not helpful. Any part of it, none of that is helpful. So, it's really...
The OK button is helpful.
Huh?
The OK button is helpful.
So, when it comes to error messaging, we have to be very clear. And I brought you a very quick template that you can use to write out copy. Because sometimes, for error messages, because sometimes you don't have the designer to do it for you, or they like, no, I'm a designer, I don't write copy. But at the end of the day, this is a very important part of it. and somebody has to take care of it. So the first things first is that, like, what's the issue? Because displaying some sort of error message that doesn't really help a lot, or an error occurred. Thank you, that's helpful. So that's why I say human language. And then it's important to point out what could have gone wrong. So, for example, I don't know, there's a timeout or slow internet connections or not enough funds on your credit card or whatever, because it can help the user to recover from those issues. And obviously the third element of a good error message template is showing and instructing the user that how they could recover from that mistake or issue. And the last part is actually providing a call to action, which is a button or something that helps you to actually go through and not just hit OK that, OK, I'm screwed. OK? Yes, of course. So this is the template. And since I was talking a lot, now we want to do something together. And what I thought it would be interesting, and it's a pretty easier task, is so when you are with a checkout process, so you are buying something, for example, and there's a problem with your credit card payment, and you don't want to use that, an error occurred, please try again, or try again later, then how you could build up a message using this template. And what I thought it would be interesting if you would all have pen and papers, and using this template, you could write out an error message and we could discuss it. Do you want to do this? If you don't say no, then okay.
I have a question. So one thing that over and over annoys me with forms is that often they, like, say it's a form for a phone number.
Okay.
And I have an expander kind of thing. So I write tell, and then it expands into my phone number.
Okay.
But then it prohibits me from writing text because there's supposed to only put digits in there.
Okay.
And this happens quite a lot. And a similar thing, like some things you can't paste into a field.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that's, I can understand that for some very particular cases, but usually I don't understand why.
There's a lot of things that I don't understand about forms, but it's like there's going to be another section dedicated to forms. But I think what's also interesting is, yeah, you have to think, and this is why the context part is important, because if you don't think that people would use like copy paste in that part, or you give like a specific validation form to that input field, and they would want something else, then it could really screw up the experience, and it could be really annoying. And like the whole form user experience could fill in another book, because most of the time, I think they're like that's a gold mine for UX problems.
Earlier you said something like less options are better.
Okay.
It seems like a naive follow of that.
Which?
When they prohibit that, it seems like they've seen that thing that, okay, I should give less options. I should.
Yeah.
Very well.
Yeah. I don't think they follow Hicks' law, but how do you justify that? I think that's it's an excellent question, because I think that comes down to context. Because, for example, I recently ran into a problem when there was a phone number field, and there was a +1 for American phone numbers, of course, and what else, +1? So it was like built in, and you couldn't change it. And I think when the product launched, the first week, there were like 3 people were signing up with a different country code. And the problem with this is that, yeah, they wanted to limit the options for logical reasons, but like the logic was too tight because they were thinking that, yeah, it's primarily like US clients, so why not just put the +1 in, because it would be convenient for them. But they didn't think through the context that, yeah, but you could live in the US but wouldn't have a +1 a phone number, or the company could go and decide that they would want to have clients from other countries. And so it boils down to the question of context, that it's not worth limiting options in term just for logical reasons. It's worth limiting options when you have to make a decision between choosing a different path. So for example, the sign up is a lot more interesting question, that limiting the way that you could use social sign up is a good thing, because it's not a big deal unless there's some information you want to extract from a platform. So in a lot of cases, I really recommend people to just go with 1 or max 2 kinds of signups. But 1 is better because we saw it in an older test that there's just, okay, this is the way I sign up. I don't question it. But it can backfire, because we're building a product and the social sign-up could really backfire, because they wanted to have like social sign-up, but it was a professional setting, and to build up your professional resume and stuff. And people were worried about that if they sign up with Facebook, even because they don't know how it works. They don't know what kind of data they can pull out and stuff. So they was worried about what, like it's going to be shared on their newsfeed, or will it pull in their data from Facebook and their images. And it really backfired, because you don't want them to think about these kind of things. But if you put yourself into your customer's shoes and think about the context behind that it helps a lot, I think. Okay, so let's give us 5 minutes and write out that copy. What do you think? Let's do it. If anyone needs help, I'm here. So. Feel free. I'll put it on. It's like, this session sucks. Generic error messages are a pain. Okay.
That I'm working on right now, we have not a problem occurred, a technical problem occurred.
Yeah. Okay, then I need to ask you to if anyone wants to read it out, so we could discuss it. We want to keep it to yourself. Okay, great.
Payment failed, insufficient funds, retry.
Okay. This insufficient fund is the only thing that could go wrong?
I don't know, probably just in this situation.
Okay. And what was the CDA at the... try again?
Retry, yeah.
Retry, okay.
I don't know if there's other...
Yeah, we'll see if there's other solution, but it's good. And it's a lot better, for example, than that error occurred thing was. So it helped. Who wants... Okay.
Your card does not support this type of purchase.
Okay.
This type of
Purchase.
Okay. And so what should I do?
Please contact someone.
Oh, please contact someone. Okay, right. I mean, in this case, you could just fall back to, I don't know, the info at whatever, the company's generic email address, for example. Or what you could do is,
Providing the accepted card type.
for example, yes, that's a good solution. That, okay, this is not supported, so blah, 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 blah. I would structure it like this, that, okay, this type of card is not supported for this kind of purchase, so please try again with another card button. And then, if you're having difficulties, then please contact their support at blah, 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 blah. So you are like covering every aspect of that situation. Okay? Sir?
Okay, so really like a pop-up with the title payment failed. So
Okay.
answer your attention, and after that, there was a problem with the validation of your payment.
Okay.
Please check your limit or contact customer support and add two buttons. Call support, which automatically might direct you to the phone app
Mhm.
with the support number to fill in. Okay. Which you can retry.
Okay, excellent. Anybody?
in the current application, we have the redeployment of a new version takes a bit of time. The service is unavailable,
Mm.
and it just says service unavailable.
Okay.
So one possible thing would be the server didn't accept your file.
Okay.
It's a file. Possibly because it was updating to a new version.
Okay.
If so, it should work in a few minutes.
Okay.
Retry?
Good. Okay. I like it. Because if you think about it, it's a lot more human, and I think I really like conversational types of messages, so you don't have to be formal. I don't even know like a formal communication for a product, because in this case you want to easily understand. So the language that you just use is very conversational. This is like somebody telling you that, okay, here's the problem, but here you can solve it, and all that. So all these solutions are great. Oh.
It's interesting you say that, because the reason we didn't do this in the first place
Mhm.
was because we were ashamed that the deployment took some time. We didn't have downtime. So we didn't dare to expose the fact that we were not technically
Yeah.
advanced in the way that we.
You know what? It's the same as when, in the agency world, you have clients, and for example, I cannot deliver on time. We agreed on something, and okay, in that situation, what you do? And a lot of people, an instant reaction is that to push really hard and not to call the client, not to communicate, because you feel uncomfortable that you agreed on something and you couldn't deliver on time. But in reality, it's a lot worse, because then the client doesn't know what's going on. And so if you communicate everything in time, and it's true for a lot of things. For example, my father, I don't know, he's like doing some sort of construction, and he needed some material, and the company was delayed by weeks, and they didn't call him, and that was the problem. Because if they would call him and say that, sorry, it wouldn't be ready in time, or call him like once a week, then he's like, okay, I'm good, I can rearrange my schedule, because timing can be flexible. These things can be flexible, but if you communicate enough and in time, then it's a lot better. So I don't think you should like be ashamed that the product is not working from time to time, or there's any sort of issue. But if there's an issue, like, make sure that you communicate it, because the worst thing that could happen to you is that you don't know what's going on. And that is something that makes you suspicious about the product, that, what's that? Because you can accept that other people make mistakes. You make mistakes, so why wouldn't they make mistakes? But if you don't know that, and you don't know what's the situation, that's the worst, because that's like, is this product working at all? And so do I expect it to work in the future? So this is why communication, like in real life, I think it's very important. Okay, so I'm a bit, we don't have enough time. Anyway, so microcopy, to, which?
Can you switch back with the...
Oh, of course. Anyway, it will worth check out the rest of the slides if you download it, because there will be a lot of screens that we wouldn't touch. So to collect microcopies is just a hint. You could give it to a PO or a designer, and there's a template in the website. This is how I do it. This is how we do it in the team, and it works extremely well. That instead of creating like 20 pop-ups of the same design, instead just create a very nice spreadsheet and go through all the different states, all the different elements. And here you can see like a cart button, and a cart button's text could have like different states. That like there's an empty state that your cart is empty, or item in the cart. So like the context or when it appears, an item is in the cart. So one item or X item or whatever. Or the user abandons the page without completing the checkout. Next time it will show a bar at the top of the page to inform that they can finish the process. Now it's very interesting, because here it's not even the same design, because the first two states were changing the actual button, but this is like a system notification thing that appears with 100% at the top. But it's kept together, and when you're developing that, it's helpful to just copy paste out from this backlog. So now, in the last part of this discussion, we're going into forms. And just to recap very quickly, we have labels, we have placeholders, and we have hints. This is the basic structure. And I brought some interesting case studies here. Now, the problem with this is a bad example. The problem here is, I mean, it could work another way, but if it's a placeholder and it disappears, especially in mobile, then it's a pretty bad practice, because then it doesn't help you to fill that in. And also, the contrast is pretty low, and designers just love that light gray color. Now, if you think about it, when you decrease the brightness on your phone, or is it broken, or it's not a crisp retina screen, or not high quality enough, it becomes very, very hard to read stuff. So like readability it's very important, and you can give this feedback to designers anytime. And the spacing is not so good, so if you would take it in your hands, it's very hard to tap on the different form fields. It's again something that when designers do it, they need to design it by a mobile in hand. When you develop it, you need to check out that it's very easy to tap on, and you don't need like laser fingers for that. So instead, come on in. Okay. So this is a better approach. As you can see, I still see the label because the placeholder was transformed into a label. I can see there's enough contrast. I can separate these two by the color, and it's very easy to tap on. And for example, this is a good approach that I like. because it saves a lot of space. This is not the only way to build up forms, but it's definitely a good one, because as you can see, I have a nice big placeholder at first that animates into a label, and then I can input whatever I want. You could animate it, and it becomes like a nice transition, so it's also sexy. It's a win-win-win-win-win from every direction. Sometimes you need other arrangements, but this is something worth mentioning, that it's a good practice. And yeah, error handling, it's going to be nice. I saw this, so I copied this from a bigger application. I entered a bad email address or bad password, and it's obviously very frequent that I get this nice, helpful message. And here's what I was referring to before, that I don't even recognize that this is an error message at first, because green color, success, great. And only the text, and it's not tied to the previous screen. So it causes me a hard time to identify this at first. So instead, this would be a nice approach, that I instantly give feedback to the users that, oh, that input, that's messed up, and we work on the copy as well, and like place a little bar above the inputs that's like really connected, really tied to that screen, that there's a problem. What you could even do is actually make it disabled for this, so everything is perfectly aligned. Yes, obviously this is a special case because I couldn't validate just one input because for security reasons. And this is a very controversial something. It's Airbnb. And sorry, it's the Hungarian version. And what I wanted to show is it's a good practice that I typed in the email. I write while it restarts. Okay, so it's a good practice that I type in the email and then it validates the address. It's a lot stranger that it validates the password when I type in one character. And then I like that it's all red, but the message is at the bottom. So if you hold it in your hands, no way you're going to spot it out that there's something's going on. So despite, like most of the time Airbnb is pretty good, I was just surprised to discover that, okay, it validates my password, and then I have no idea how to recover from an error because, yeah, only the color coding. So good and bad practices as well. Something that I always tell every time, please tell me what's the problem with this screen. I have text, yes? Exactly. This is one thing, and the second thing is that I have no idea that this input is highlighted. So this is why a style guide, for example, is very good, because it forces you to think through that, okay, here's an input, here's a hover state, and here's a focus mode or whatever, focus with text typed in and focus out and all that kind of states. Because here, it's a problem that I cannot even identify that I'm typing stuff into this input. And yeah, it's funny, it's +1, and I don't really see numbers here. And obviously, this is like a single line of code that you need to change. This is a great experience. Verification code, I see how many I have to enter. I see it's a focus, yes, because there's like a little something at the first bar. And I have the numbers. If it would be a phone number, you have the numpad for that too. And it works on web as well. And it's a very good practice, and now I'm not 100% sure on this, but I heard from developer friends that iOS is trying to force this. So you would have to communicate why you need access to certain types of things in a phone. So for example, sending notifications, accessing photos, camera, and contacts. Now, the problem here is that as a user, I don't know why you ask that information. and what kind of notifications you would be sending to. Because obviously, if you use Uber, that it's like, yeah, enabling location, enabling notifications, that you know what to expect. But from a random app, it doesn't work. So instead, for example, this is Musical.ly, and before showing this permission screen, they build up a separate screen that first like warms you up why it's important to access the context, what you do with it. I mean, if you don't have this screen, everyone will just freak out if they're accessing context. Wait, why? But here, it shows me and the benefits, and if you have a good microcopy here, it works pretty well, that why it's important to access context, and obviously, then you can show the default screen with probably customized messages if it's possible. So this is a great technique, and you could use it for a wide range of things. And this is something that if you don't have this screen from designers, you should definitely go ahead and ask, because they probably don't think about it. I mean, some designers do, but it's very important to have this from the UX perspective. And this is very fun. It's a health application, and the whole sign-up process is like a discussion or conversation style. And the most important part of it is they need access to the health app of iOS, which is not like enabling notifications, since you have to switch, like on and off the things that you want to share with the app, and then authorize the whole process. And you're taken into a new app, so the risk of like screwing up something. Even though you might go like, oh, it's a pretty simple interaction. But as a user, the first time you use something, there's a pretty great chance that you screw something up. So instead, they go ahead and really, and it's animated, by the way, it just doesn't show. So they place a great effort into like explaining it first, and then it takes you to the health app. And I said earlier that when it comes to signups, less is better, and you have to separate the different routes. So the biggest problem here is that I have no idea that these inputs are connected to which button exactly. And this is a lie. I didn't invent this screen, so it's not made up. I just copied it. So one thing that's very important all the time is to always separate the different sign-up and login processes. And as you can see, I made a lot more contrast with the copy as well, because having sign in and sign up, that's too close. Having like login, register, or sign up and login, that works great. And you have to be careful and limit the options for social logins as well. So at the end, sorry I have to rush a bit. I don't want to cause any more delays during the conference. So who knows what empty states are? No. Okay. This is how the airport of Amsterdam, called Schiphol, this is how their app looks like, and the messaging section before you would have any messaging. Another UX issue is that it's called messages, but it's like a one way of messaging, because you cannot send messages to them. So it's really like a notification. It's like, yeah, a microcopy issue. But the thing is, what you do when you don't have content on the screen, you leave it empty, right? But what you could do is to use that space and that are empty states. So to use that empty screen to give more information to the users. One way to use that is with like a nice personalized icon and explain what's going to be included here. It helps the users to understand the screen a lot better than just seeing empty, nothing's in there. A bit better solution, is this is the same app, dashboard. Nothing's here. And if you add your flight, then it puts your boarding pass right at the dashboard and shows you updates, and you need to start to the gate because it takes like 20 minutes to walk because it's a huge airport. So there would be a lot of great stuff, but you don't know it until you go into flights, add your flight, and boom. So instead of leaving this empty, they showed that, okay, here's going to be your flight, and this is what you're going to gain by adding a flight. And they also included the CTA to push them to start and add your flight. And this is for mobile apps, web applications. For example, this is a web application, and this search feature is very important, but you cannot access it unless you make connections throughout the site. So instead of just having like a single line of message or something, or leaving it empty, we communicate that what you need to do to get started and push people to get started. Because otherwise it's kind of frustrating that you see all these empty screens and you don't know what to do with it. Or here, before you would make any reservations, it's again empty. So don't leave it empty, but we show that, okay, this is how it's going to look like. You're going to see the little description of what you can expect, and also have the CTA. So these are the elements of a great empty states. Now I don't go into this. If you're interested in how to make primary, secondary buttons, and what kind of colors and variations you could use, then I recommend you check out that link at the top. So we have a few more minutes to either discuss that or you can ask questions. I know it was a bit problematic if you want to see the animated version. Yes. Okay. So from my end, I stop talking unless you ask a question or we go to the board and see what's there. Which? Sorry?
I think the presentation was pretty dynamic, so we can go to the board maybe.
Okay. Okay. Probably I will be needing some sort of help, but I'll just go from the... Okay, this is interesting. Design is not ready. So let's discuss this. What do we mean by design is not ready?
Not ready or incomplete. I
You...
mean, the developer have the option to, I don't know, implement it in a way,
Okay.
and then something will change,
Okay.
and I don't know, probably some minor changes in the design can impact the development. I don't know. That's a possible problem.
Okay. And this is a problem that you like ran into. So when the design is constantly changing and updating, and so it's asynchronous with the development. That's mainly one, style guides and updating designs and communication between designers. Some other ones. We saw the generic error messages are a pain. Okay, not using default native components, but rather reinventing the wheel. Okay, this is an interesting one. Mobile development, I suppose. Okay, I know it's a pain. Yeah, I know it's a pain in the ass, but it's an interesting question because sometimes you don't want to use the default components if you are, for example, you want to design for cross-platform things, and but it's. Mm-hmm.
Has a certain behavior like a spinner.
Yeah.
When Android goes from
Yeah.
bottom, it fills with items.
Yeah. I mean, for example, personally, I love those components. So all the default, for example, on iOS, all the drop down and thing, because they use the haptic engine as well. So and it really makes it like easy to use it. So yeah, I mean, I think that for designers, it's pretty. I mean, they need to be educated in this because they might not have that ability to see what are the different components. So, for example, in our team, everyone's like Apple, 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 Apple. They wouldn't have the slightest guess how it works on Android. Hopefully, we most of the time we design cross-platform or iOS. But in this case, you would need to like dig into the library and have like a great way to assess those design patterns. Because for example, in Sketch, it comes with the default library of the full iOS thing. That's great, but it doesn't come with the default Android thing. So I think there's like an educational or information gap in this that obviously you, as a designer, you have to consider the platform that you're designing for. But yeah, it's hard to overcome this issue if.
Also, on a web application, if you decide that you want to use the material design guideline.
Okay.
You're kind of creating other elements that are not really in sync with what's
Mm-hmm.
happening. That would be distracting from the user. He expects something and then he gets something else as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, on the user end, it's always interesting because among these libraries, there are good things and bad things as well. So, for example, there are a lot of great stuff with iOS, but it comes with a lot of shit as well. So I think they invented that to the top left corner to put the back navigation, which is very fun, yeah, because I have to always do ballet to go back. And if you don't override these information, then you're just following blindly what Apple thinks is best. And nobody ever would abandon an iPhone because the back navigation is not convenient, because there's far more things to device and the platform. But they could abandon an app if it's designed in a bad way. Yeah. So, and you can drop in, or feel free to drop in anything you want. Or you could escape if you want, so. Yeah, let's make it officially over, okay? So I thank you for your attention. Okay.
Please move once again to the screen with the link. With the
Of course, yes.
Thank you.
No. Wait. By the way, it's my new enemy, which is Team Drive. I don't know if you use it. If no, then you shouldn't be using that. I make updates to this presentation, then I save it, then I close it, and it reverts back because Drive syncs it back. So, okay. So, thanks for your attention. I hope this time was well spent. I'm around. You can always ask me anything about designs and UX and development. Not really, but thank you for choosing this session, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.